In a faraway village, deep within the kingdom of Aroa, lived 14-year-old Akena. His family was not like other families in the village, where laughter could be heard and families gathered around the fire at night. No, Akena's home was a place of pain and darkness, for his father, Kato, was a cruel and abusive man. Every day, Kato would beat Akena's mother, Malinga, until she could hardly move. The blows were so hard, they left her bruised and broken. She couldn't fight back. Akena watched in horror as his father raged, his fists pounding against her frail body. "This is how you keep a woman in line," Kato would say, his voice full of venom. Sometimes he would turn his anger towards Akena, slapping and kicking him for the smallest mistake. "If I'm not here, you must beat your mother if she misbehaves," Kato demanded, his eyes burning with hatred. Akena, trembling with fear, would only nod, but deep in his heart, he refused to hurt his mother. Every night after the blows, Akena would sit beside his mother, his hands trembling to soothe her wounds. "Mama, let's run away. We can leave Baba. We can be free," he would plead, his voice cracking with desperation. But Malinga always shook her head, her face wet with tears. "Where would we go, Akena? I have no money. How would I feed you? Women are not allowed to work, and we would starve. I must stay for you." Her words crushed Akena's spirit, and he could feel the weight of her helplessness settling in his chest. On top of all this, Akena had another problem that made life unbearable. He was a serial bedwetter. Every night, no matter how hard he tried to stay dry, he woke up in a pool of pee. It was worse when he fell asleep during day, as the shame followed him everywhere. The children in the village mocked him mercilessly. They had given him several embarrassing nicknames. His mother would help him hang his soaked reeds to dry in the sun, but the humiliation never went away. "Why can't I stop, Mama? Why do I keep wetting the bed?" Akena would cry, his eyes filled with shame. Malinga had no answers, only a sad look in her eyes. In his desperation, Akena turned to the stories told by the villagers, who say that eating grasshoppers would cure bedwetting. So day after day, he roamed the bush, catching and eating grasshoppers until his stomach churned, but nothing changed. One day, while hunting for grasshoppers, Akena wandered deep into the forest than usual. There, hidden beneath the thick vines and towering trees, he stumbled upon a shrine he had never seen before. His heart raced as he stepped closer, curiosity overpowering his fear. Inside the shrine sat an old witch doctor, his eyes sharp and knowing. "Akena," the witch doctor called out, startling him. Akena froze, fear gripping his body. "How do you know my name?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The witch doctor chuckled softly, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "I know many things. I know why you're here. I have the medicine that will stop your bedwetting." Akena's heart leaped with hope, but then a thought struck him. Witchcraft always requires a sacrifice. His body tensed with fear. "No, I can't," he said, stepping back. "I don't want to make a sacrifice. I have to go." He turned and bolted out of the shrine, the witch doctor's voice echoing behind him. "The grasshoppers will never help you, Akena. Only I can stop your curse." Akena ran until his legs ached, his heart pounding in his chest. When he finally reached home, his mother wasn't there. Malinga had told him earlier that she was going to fetch water, but it was already dark, and she still hadn't returned. Worry gnawed at Akena as he raced to the well, calling out for her, but there was no sign of Malinga. The neighbors, some sympathetic, some indifferent, shook their heads. One woman even said, "Your mother has abandoned you, boy. She's gone." Akena stood frozen, his heart shattering. Could it be true? Could his mother The person he thought would never leave him have abandoned him. His mind swelled with confusion and pain. Tears streamed down his face as he ran back to their hut crying. He waited all night, but Malinga never returned. His father was still out drinking with his friends, so Akena crawled into his parents' bed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, his mother would come back by morning. But when Kato returned, reeking of alcohol, he found Akena sleeping in his bed. His son had once again peed all over the bed. "Akena!" Kato shouted, the fury in his voice shaking the walls of the hut. He stormed over to the bed, grabbing Akena by the arm and slapping him across the face so hard that Akena saw stars. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you will never forget," Kato screamed. Akena cried out, pleading for mercy, but his father was deaf to his cries. Kato grabbed a knife, his eyes wild with rage. Akena's heart stopped. "No, father, no, please!" Akena screamed, his hands desperately trying to shield himself. But Kato was relentless. He tore Akena's pants open and, with a cold fury, cut off his manhood. A scream unlike anything the villagers had ever heard tore through the night, echoing across the village. Blood poured from the wound, and Akena, overcome with pain and terror, stumbled out of the house. He ran, his vision blurred by tears, his hands desperately trying to stop the bleeding. He ran back to the witch doctor's shrine, the one where he thought he might find hope. "Please, help me!" Akena cried, collapsing at the witch doctor's feet. "My father, he cut off my manhood. Please, can you put it back?" The witch doctor looked down at Akena, unfazed by the gruesome sight. He seemed almost amused by Akena's desperation. "I'll do anything," Akena sobbed. "Please, I'll make any sacrifice you ask." The witch doctor studied him for a moment before shaking his head. "I'm in a generous mood today. I won't ask you for a sacrifice, but I need you to go back home and bring your little manhood to me." Akena's heart sank. "But I don't know where it is. I was in so much pain. I don't remember where it fell." His voice trembled with fear. He didn't want to go back to the house, didn't want to face his father again, but the witch doctor's offer was too good to refuse. With a deep breath, he turned and ran back into the darkness, knowing that time was running out. He had one chance to find it, or lose everything forever. Akena limped back home, his legs trembling with exhaustion and pain. The wound from his manhood still throbbed, sending waves of agony through his body with each step. As he neared his home, he crept silently around the hut, peeking through the open window. Inside, he saw his father sleeping on the bed, snoring loudly, oblivious of the horrors he had caused earlier that night. The sight of his father sleeping peacefully after everything he had done sent a wave of rage through Akena. His fists clenched tightly at his sides, his heart pounding with fury. He wanted to end him, to make his father pay for all the pain he had inflicted on him and his mother. But Akena hesitated. He wasn't a killer, not yet. Instead, he slowly and silently climbed through the window, careful not to make any sound. His eyes scanned the room, searching desperately for his severed manhood. But the room was eerily clean. The blood that had soaked the ground earlier was gone, as if nothing had happened. His father must have cleaned up the mess while Akena was running through the bush. Akena's heart sank as he frantically searched every corner of the room. He checked under the bed, in the corners, even in the rubbish pile, but there was no sign of his manhood. The more he searched, the more hopeless he felt. Silent tears streamed down his face as the crushing reality set in. His last hope of restoration was gone. With a heavy heart, Akena limped back into the bush, making his way towards the shrine once again. His steps were slow, his body weakened by both physical and emotional pain. The night was dark, and the wind howled through the trees, but nothing was more haunting than the ache deep inside him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Akena felt a sharp sting on his leg. He looked down in horror to see a deadly snake sinking its fangs into his flesh. Akena screamed, falling to the ground as the venom quickly spread through his body. His leg felt like it was on fire, the pain unbearable. The snake, its eyes gleaming in the moonlight, coiled around his leg, tightening its grip as Akena writhed in agony. "Help! Help!" Akena cried weakly, his voice barely a whisper as the venom started paralyzing his body. His breaths grew shallow, his vision blurry. The snake began to squeeze tighter, as if trying to finish him off once and for all. But when Akena thought he was about to die, he heard a soft whistling sound through the night. The witch doctor appeared, his silhouette emerging from the darkness, his eyes focusing on the snake that was slowly killing Akena. The witch doctor continued whistling, a hypnotic tune, and to Akena's amazement, the snake loosened its grip and slithered away from his leg. It seemed mesmerized by the sound, following the witch doctor obediently as he carried Akena to the shrine. The witch doctor knelt beside Akena, pouring a potion into his mouth. "Drink," he commanded. Akena, too weak to resist, swallowed the bitter liquid. Moments later, he felt a warmth spreading through his body, slowly melting away the paralysis. He could move his limbs again, but the pain from his leg and manhood still lingered. Akena's eyes widened as he spotted the snake that had bitten him, still coiled near the witch doctor's feet. "Snake!" he gasped, jumping up in fear only to groan in pain from his wounded body. "Calm down," the witch doctor said with a smirk. "The snake is harmless now. It's under my control." Akena, though still terrified, backed away cautiously. I couldn't find it. My father must have thrown it away," Akena stammered, tears of frustration welling up in his eyes. The witch doctor smiled mysteriously. "I have a better option for you, Akena," he said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Tell me, what is the similarity between a snake and a pee-pee?" Akena blinked in confusion. "What?" He glanced at the snake, side-eyeing the witch doctor suspiciously. Then, as if a light bulb went off in his head, Akena let out a short, nervous laugh. "Well, they both like entering holes," he said hesitantly. The witch doctor roared with laughter, slapping his knee. Akena then asked why the witch doctor asked the question. "I don't know. It just popped up," the witch doctor said. "Now, listen carefully. Since you have no manhood anymore, I can offer you something else. This snake." He pointed to the serpent that had nearly killed Akena moments ago. "It can become your new manhood." Akena's mouth dropped open in shock. "What? No," he protested, shaking his head. "How can I have a snake for a manhood? This thing almost killed me." The witch doctor chuckled. "Don't be so quick to refuse, boy. You will learn to control it. I'll teach you how, and you won't have to worry about bedwetting anymore. The snake will take care of your excretions. This is your only chance. If you refuse now and come back later, I will demand a sacrifice." Akena stood there, torn. The idea of having a snake for a manhood was terrifying, but he was desperate. With his real manhood gone, what other choice did he have? Slowly, he nodded. "All right," he whispered. "I'll do it." The witch doctor's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Good choice, Akena." The witch doctor whistled once again, a soft, soothing melody. The snake slowly slithered towards Akena, its beady eyes locked onto him. Akena stood frozen, fear gnawing at him as the serpent coiled around his leg and made its way up to his thigh. It paused at his thigh, as if waiting for the witch doctor's command. With a wave of his hand and a loud spell, the witch doctor merged the snake with Akena's body. A strange sensation coursed through him as the snake fused with his wounded manhood area, its scales disappearing into his skin. Akena gasped, watching in awe as the transformation took place. The witch doctor smiled. This snake will be your weapon, Akena. Use it wisely, only to protect yourself, or you might find yourself in trouble. Over the next few weeks, the witch doctor trained Akena in the art of controlling the serpent. He taught him how to whistle commands, how to control its length, and how to summon it at will. Akena practiced day and night, determined to master his new power. And true to the witch doctor's word, Akena no longer wet the bed. The snake had full control over his bodily functions, and with each passing day, Akena grew stronger. But beneath it all, Akena's anger festered. The resentment he had for both his parents grew like a poison in his heart. He vowed to make them pay for the suffering they had caused him. One night, after the witch doctor had finished his teachings, he told Akena he was free to leave. Akena made his way back to his father's house, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. He was no longer the weak, scared boy he once was. He was something more, something powerful. Akena waited in the darkness for his father to return. When Kato finally stumbled into the house, drunk and oblivious, Akena stepped out of the shadows. His father blinked, confused at the sight of his son, standing in the middle of the room. "I thought you were dead. What are you doing here?" Kato asked. Without a word, Akena whistled softly. The snake emerged from his pants, elongating in response to the sound. Kato's eyes widened in horror as he saw the creature that had become Akena's new manhood. What? What is this?" Kato shouted, stumbling back in shock. Akena kept whistling, his eyes cold and unforgiving. The snake lunged forward, sinking its fangs into Kato's neck. His father screamed, choking on the venom as it coursed through his veins. "You evil boy!" Kato gasped, his voice growing weaker. Akena watched as his father crumpled to the ground, his body convulsing in pain. Tears welled in Akena's eyes, but he didn't stop. His father had cut off his manhood before he ever had the chance to enjoy the sweetness of women. How dare he? Kato let out one final rattling breath before his body went still. Akena stood over him, tears streaming down his face, but deep inside, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. He had avenged himself. His father was dead. He was free. Now, no one could ever hurt him again. Akena felt invincible, like he could do anything. However, over the years, Akena's heart was consumed with rage as he thought of his mother. 8 long years had passed since she abandoned him. He searched tirelessly for her, driven by anger, betrayal, and the burning desire to confront her. And then one day, he finally found her. She was living in the wealthiest part of the village, married to a rich man, surrounded by luxury. She had 2 children now, his half-siblings, and she seemed content, even happy in her new life. Akena watched them from afar, his heart swelling with jealousy. He could see them playing together, his mother laughing with her children and her husband. The sight made his blood boil. How could she move on? How could she forget about him? He had only ever been hers, and she had left him. As the night fell, Akena made his move. He slipped through the shadows, sinking into the house while his mother was busy in the kitchen. He watched her from the doorway for a moment, her back turned to him as she prepared dinner. His fists clenched, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment he had waited for. "Mama," Akena's voice came out cold, filled with anger and pain. His mother spun around, gasping in shock. Her hands trembled, and the knife she had been holding fell from her grip, clattering to the floor. "Akena," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "How did you find me?" Akena stepped closer, his face twisted with a mix of rage and sadness. Tears streamed down his face, but there was no softness in his eyes. "Why did you leave me, Mama?" His voice cracked with emotion. "You just abandoned me, just like that. For this?" He gestured wildly around the fancy kitchen, disgusted by the wealth and comfort she had now enjoyed while he suffered. His mother stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. "Akena, I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice. Your father, he would have killed me if I stayed. I had to run," she stammered, her hands shaking. Akena's anger flared even more at her words. "You left me with him?" he shouted, stepping closer. His voice was filled with bitterness. "Do you know what he did to me after you left?" He paused, his lips curling into a sad smile. "He came home that night, found me sleeping on your bed. I had wet the bed." His voice became softer, almost mocking. "And do you know what he did? He cut off my manhood." His mother gasped in horror, her face going pale. "Oh my God, Akena. No, I didn't know," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't know." But Akena didn't care about her apologies. He had already made up his mind about her long ago. She had abandoned him, betrayed him. He stepped even closer, ignoring her pleas. Slowly, he began to whistle. It was a soft, eerie sound, a bit sharp, but it had a strange, mesmerizing effect. His mother's eyes widened in confusion as she watched him. "Akena, what are you?" Her words were cut off as the snake began to emerge from Akena's pants. She let out a terrified scream as the serpent uncoiled itself, its scales glistening in the dim light of the kitchen. "What is this?" she cried, backing away in horror. Akena didn't stop whistling. The snake moved swiftly, lunging at her with lightning speed. Its fangs sank into her flesh, and she screamed, clutching her arm where the venomous bite had landed. Her body convulsed as the venom spread rapidly, attacking her nervous system. Akena stood by, watching as his mother collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. Her breathing became shallow, her skin turning pale and clammy as the venom worked its deadly magic. She gasped for air, her eyes wide with terror as she looked up at her son. But Akena's face remained expressionless, his voice low and filled with cold hatred. "You betrayed me, Mama. I never expected anything from Father. He was always a cruel man. But you were supposed to protect me. Instead, you left me to suffer." His mother's body began to twitch uncontrollably as the venom reached her heart. Her breath grew weaker, her vision fading. Akena stood over her, silent tears streaming down his face, but there was no regret, only anger. She had failed him, and now she was paying for the price. Moments later, his mother's husband and children burst into the kitchen, drawn by her scream. They found her lifeless on the floor, her face frozen in a mask of terror. But Akena was already gone, vanished into the darkness. From that day on, Akena swore vengeance on all women. In his twisted mind, they were the cause of all suffering. It was because of women that children were born into this cruel world, only to suffer. And so, he made it his life's mission to teach them a lesson, one by one. He roamed from village to village, killing women in secret, his snake manhood becoming his weapon of choice. Each time he whistled, the serpent would emerge, and a death would follow. The villagers lived in fear, whispering about the mysterious killer who preyed on women. But Akena was always one step ahead. Eventually, the villagers caught wind of his identity. They cornered him one night, surrounding his hut with fire torches and weapons, ready to take him down. But Akena had already disappeared into the night, fleeing to the kingdom of Ankole. In Ankole Kingdom, Akena kept a low profile, learning the craft of building to blend in with the locals. But his hunger for vengeance hadn't died. He continued his secret killings, targeting women in the kingdom, leaving no trace behind. Unfortunately for him, Ayebare, the princess of Ankole, outsmarted him and used his own tricks on him. So what do you think of this story, guys? What do you think of the origin of Akena? Is this what you expected? Don't forget to like this video. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time I post new videos. Stay tuned for my next video, guys. Thank you for watching.